Yesterday we talked about the infield, and if we're keeping it 100, as the kids say, they don't say it anymore. It was not the most positive conversation. There were a lot of uh-ohs. I am very concerned about that group. I'm not saying I'm completely bereft of concerns with the outfield, but coming into the season, this is the most excited I've been about a Mariner outfield in a long time. And some of that has to do, let's do a little history lesson here, guys. The Mariners have had some really good outfields. They've never really had a complete outfield. I mean, they've had Ken Griffey Jr. and Jay Buhner together. And for spurts, they've had kind of that complete outfield. They trade for Vince Coleman in 95, and that makes a pretty good one. They trade for Ricky Henderson in 2000. That makes a pretty good one. RIP Ricky. They've had some decent little outfields, but they've never started a season with an outfield as good as this. And maybe that's a hot take, but I feel as confident in this outfield as I have in a long time. And maybe that's darning with faint praise to me. So, different strokes for different folks, very subjective here. But I like this outfield. I get some concerns. We'll talk about it, but I like this outfield. So what we'll do is the same thing as yesterday. We will take a look at a 1 through 5 scale, 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest, and how confident I am in this group. And yesterday we went counterclockwise. We started at catcher and moved to third base. Real quick, thank you everyone who came out for the live discussion for the Cal Raleigh extension. Awesome news, best news the Mariners have had in a very, very long time. Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome. There were some people asking if I was going to do a video. I think the live is good enough. Take a look. It's 15 minutes of me talking about the extension and how great it is. And yeah, but we'll go clockwise this time and we'll start in left field. So yesterday I made a rule that I couldn't give half grades. That's stupid. I'm giving half grades because why not? It doesn't matter. So starting in left field, I'm going 3.5. And I would say I'm closer to a 4 than a 3, which is probably maybe a smidgen of a hot take because Randy Arozarena wasn't great with Seattle. He certainly wasn't bad. He got on base at a very nice clip. The power wasn't great. I just believe in the talent. I believe in Randy Arozarena's talent, especially with the bat. And, he doesn't have to be an elite hitter. It certainly would be nice, if he's the version that we've seen in the postseason and for spurts. But he doesn't have to be that. He has to be a good middle of the order bat. And for the most part, I think Randy Arozarena has been that. I was such a big fan of that trade, even though, Brody Hopkins has a chance to be a good one. Aiden Smith has a good chance to be a good one. I was so happy to see that Ty Cummings was the player to be named later. All due respect to Ty Cummings, but there were some mentions of some bigger names. By the way, that's 3 2023 draft picks who ended up being moved in that. So no matter what, the 2023 draft was a success. I believe in Randy Arozarena. I think he has a chance to be one of the, and this is definitely darning with faint praise, one of the best left fielders in Seattle Mariner history. All of the talent is there with the bat. My reason that I'm 3.5 is number one, there are moments where things go bad with Randy Arozarena. There have been over his career, which is not all that short anymore. It's not long, but it's not like 2 or 3 years anymore. There are flashes, spurts, better term, where things go really bad. And the Mariners can't afford that. Everybody slumps. Let's make that abundantly clear. Even the very best hitters of all time go through slumps. But Randy Arozarena has beyond slumps. He has lulls where things go really bad, and they can't afford that. They can afford a couple weeks of it. They can't afford a month or 2 months of that. They can't. Their infield isn't good enough to make up for that. Defensively is the other concern. Randy Arozarena is not a great defensive player. And it helps to have the guy next to him in center field to help make up for that. but he's not a great defensive player. And so the bat has to carry him. In order for him to be a 3 to 4 win player, he's going to have to be worth about 3.5 wins because you're talking about a half a win defender, I think. Maybe a 1, excuse me, if everything goes right. It's tough to see. It's tough to see. But the bat is there. And you can talk about how he's not a great fit at T-Mobile. Okay. I think he'll make up for it. I think he'll be good enough at home. And I think he'll rake enough on the road that the overall experience will be a good one. So I'm going 3.5 with left field. I'm going to move over to right field. I was thinking about, but we got to end with center field, don't we? Victor Robles, I'm going with a 3. And I thought about 4, but 3 just seems like the safer number and honestly the fairer number. I don't think you can overstate how good Victor Robles was with the Seattle Mariners. I don't think you can overstate how much trouble they would have been if they didn't have Victor Robles in the outfield last year. I mean, so they sign him, and the funny thing about Victor Robles is his very first chance as a Seattle Mariner is an air. And he's infamously is probably too strong a word, but he gets discarded by the Nationals at Robles' request. And the Mariners pick him up off the scrap heap, and he makes an error on his first chance. And, the expectation was that he was going to come in and play solid defense as a replacement, and maybe get some starts against left-handed pitching. And then he became your most consistent offensive weapon. That's pretty crazy. And I think there's reasons for optimism and concern. The reason for optimism is he was excellent and he looked the part with the bat. And you can't completely ignore his prospect pedigree. Many people believe that Victor Robles was the best prospect in baseball. I had him on number 2. Excuse me, I just cannot talk today. I had him at number 2 for a couple of years in a row. And you can't completely ignore that. You can't just ignore the fact that scouts loved this guy. I can't anyway. I guess you can do whatever you want. I think Victor Robles is starting to tap into his potential. Now, on the other side, it's a very small sample size of success. Very small. And it's just worth pointing out how awful he was for a couple of years. You can't completely ignore that either. You can't completely ignore it. The reason I go 3, and maybe I should go 4, we're going to go 3.5. We're going to go 3.5, is he's a very good defensive player. Now, there have been some people who have said things I disagree with in regards to Victor Robles' defense. I disagree with them. And the metrics and the scouting community kind of back me up. That's not a shot at anyone in particular, but you've probably heard him. Victor Robles is a very solid defensive player. Very solid. Certainly good enough to play center field if they needed him to. Certainly good enough. I want to end with Julio. So let's just talk about the bench options here for the outfield. I could have gone over the bench options a little more in the infield, but a lot of the guys who are backup infielders are going to be backup outfielders too. So you've got Dylan Moore, who's perfectly capable of playing in the corner outfield. He's not great there. I vehemently disagree with the decision to give him a utility gold glove, but I don't care. And my grandma really was happy. So that's all that matters. Miles Mastrobuoni is a really interesting player, and it looks like he's going to make the roster. Can't hit, but a very solid defensive player. He is a better defensive player than Dylan Moore, and he can play a bunch of positions. He's more of a late inning substitute type guy, but he can help them. It's not perfect, and he hasn't even officially made the roster at the time of recording. it sure seems likely that he's going to be there. I think the release of Mitch Haniger, and let's just talk about that real quick, that had to happen. Had to happen. And I don't want to go too crazy about praising Seattle Mariner ownership for doing the thing they should have done, but I will give them a little bit of credit for doing that. They paid Mitch Haniger $15.5 million to play for anyone else or to not play. Now, Mitch Haniger is going to try to play because if he retires, he has to forfeit $15.5 million, and nobody wants to do that. As much pride as Mitch Haniger has, I don't think that's going to happen. But it was absolutely the right decision. I do think we owe Mitch Haniger some thanks and some platitudes. Mitch Haniger was a really good player who is also as well regarded in the clubhouse as anybody. And I think Mitch Haniger got screwed by this financial system as much as anybody. Because if he could have hit free agency when he was 28, 29, you're talking about a massive contract. But because of how baseball works and the 6 years of control, it's dumb. It's not a fair system. It's not a fair system. There, I've said my piece, but thank you, Mitch Haniger. And I hate saying it, but I'm really glad I don't have to watch him play this year. His skills are just they deteriorated so much that they had no choice. They had no choice, but they made the right choice with that non-choice. Any other outfielders that I'm missing here? We talked about Dylan Moore. Well, Luke Raley is perfectly capable of playing in the corner outfield as well. And it's nice that they've played him in the outfield over spring. So God forbid an injury happens to somebody. He's more than capable of playing in left field and right. He's not the worst center fielder I've ever seen. I certainly don't want to see it too often. If there was something to happen to the Mariners center fielder, I would want Victor Robles to play center field. I would even go Miles Mastroboni over Luke Raley. But, you know, he's a perfectly capable defender in left and right. Perfectly capable. All right. Let's talk about Julio because I struggled with this number. I don't know why I struggled with this number. I think what I struggled with was the potential reaction to this number. I'm going 5. And I know that shouldn't be a hot take, but I know how some of you react to Julio stuff. I'm going 5. This is a 24-year-old who's played at a star level and at times an MVP level. And you can't, I know a lot of people try, you cannot ignore his defense. I can't believe I didn't pull up his Savant page, but let's just talk about this. And remember, he turned 24 3 months ago, okay? Okay, so I think everyone would admit that Julio Rodriguez had a year that at times frustrated, okay? More than at times. Like there were spurts where Julio Rodriguez really frustrated. All right. This is still a 24-year-old, 23 at the time of the 2024 season, who was in the 81st percentile in expected weighted on base average, the 87th percentile of expected batting average, the 84th percentile of expected slugging, 87th percentile of average exit velocity, 89th percentile of hard hit percentage, 96th percentile of bat speed, 93rd percentile of range, outs above average, 90th percentile of arm strength, and 29th, 96th percentile of sprint speed. 29.6 was the number I was looking at. That was a disappointing year. That was disappointing. And I'm not even saying it's inaccurate. I'm saying it. There were times that Julio Rodriguez really disappointed. And to be completely fair, let's look at a couple of ugly numbers. Chase rate is awful, 37.3%. That's in the 6th percentile. Whiff percentage is awful, 30.9, 14th percentile. Walk rate and K rate are both mediocre at best at 6.2 and 25.4. Okay? So there are things Julio Rodriguez still has to work on. But those numbers are beyond impressive. Even when I give you those last numbers, to be able to do that, to have that kind of offensive aptitude while also playing as good a center field as anybody, how do you not go 5? How do you not? Now, the question is Julio Rodriguez good enough offensively to carry the Seattle Mariners? Because he's going to have to. I was looking at this today, and I only saw 2 players that need to carry their teams more than Julio Rodriguez. And you could argue that Julio should go above these guys, but we'll just put them all in a 3-way tie. It's Aaron Judge, it's Bobby Witt Jr., and it's Julio Rodriguez. And you could argue those are the 3 best players in the American League. You certainly could argue and should argue that Judge and Witt Jr. are the 2 best players in the American League. Is Julio Rodriguez good enough to carry the Seattle Mariners? And the answer to that question is he's talented enough. I don't know if he's ready to apply that talent enough to do so. But I still go 5 because I know what he's going to give me defensively. I know what he's going to give me on the bases. I know what he's going to give me for at least spurts. Like when this guy is hot, and people talk about whether or not locked in is real or not. When this guy's hot, it's hotter than anyone. It's not even close. And I realize that as I'm saying that, there are players like Shohei Ohtani and Bobby Witt Jr. and Aaron Judge. Look at Julio Rodriguez when everything is clicking. Look at the August that he had in 2023. And find another player who's doing stuff like that at that age. When Julio Rodriguez is at his best, I think he's the best player in baseball. There are too many moments where that hasn't happened, but that doesn't mean it can't be put all together. I'm not guaranteeing it's happening in 2025. I'm saying it's more than plausible. Long story short, Julio Rodriguez good. So if you add those numbers together, that's a 12 for your outfield. It's 2 3.5s and a 5. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. Now, depth, consistency, some issues. But those starting 3 are really good. I don't know why I feel like that's a hot take, but I really like this outfield. And I'd really like if you hit like, I'd really like if you hit subscribe. Back tomorrow with the pitching. I will also do a player preview. I'm trying to determine if I'm going to be able to go live tonight. Or excuse me, not tonight, for Thursday for the game. I really want to. It's going to depend on work. Julio Rodriguez is really, really good. Randy Arozarena and Victor Robles are really good. It's a good outfield. I wish I liked the infield as much, but it's a really good outfield.